those from the media or otherwise who are here. Well, I want to say thank you first of all to WattPad for letting us come in here and disrupt things generally. But it actually arose out of a previous visit that we had. I came in here before I went to Silicon Valley, and I was there, here and there, to try to figure out how we could have more stories like WattPad take place in Toronto and get more people like Alan and others to decide not just to start things here, but to stay here, or to get people to come here, or to get Canadians to return here. And you might recall we had that discussion, and Alan showed me around, and I saw a lot of the interesting work that was being done. But when we came to have a question period, it concerned itself less with matters of technology businesses and so on, and more to the sort of the realities of city life. We talked quite a bit about transit, but of course housing also came up a lot. And that coincided with a campaign, I'll call it that because that's no less than what it is, a crusade campaign, an effort on behalf of the big city mayors in Canada, so myself and the mayors of some of the other big cities, Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, Montreal, to really put housing in the spotlight, because in a number of different ways it is a serious issue that confront us as people who are leading these cities, and I think confront the cities going forward in terms of how we keep them sustainable and alive, livable and affordable. And so today, as a matter of interest, there are roundtables like this. This is not a roundtable, it's a square table, but there are discussions like this taking place in Edmonton and in Vancouver, as well as here, as part of our continuing effort to make sure that people in positions of influence and authority in government, but also in the media and elsewhere, understand the importance of this issue, the effect it's having on people's lives of all different walks of life, quite frankly, and how we have to do something about it. You are from a particular demographic, and I thank you for agreeing to be the people who will sit here and chat and tell your stories today. That a recent survey found are kind of throwing up their hands and saying, well, maybe there just isn't going to be a chance for me to purchase a home, and I might have to leave Toronto as a result. None of you said that to me when we just met down the hall, but increasingly people are saying that sort of thing, and that is of great concern to me, because the livability of the city, but also its economic success, are dependent upon smart people staying here and not deciding that the pasture is greener somewhere else where it's cheaper to live. And certainly when I was in Silicon Valley, one of the things that we have going for us in relative terms, even though we're going to talk today about some of the problems we have with housing, is that people are there are saying it's even more impossible to find a home near work. And so it's something where we can say, well, we haven't reached that stage yet, and we don't want to get there. So really what I want to do is just to have you tell a bit of your story about some of the challenges you faced in finding housing today, but also looking ahead in your lives, because I do know enough about you just from having had a little chat that you're all looking ahead to different stages in your life where you no longer want to have as many roommates, or where you might be having a family, and your housing needs change, but it doesn't change where you might want to live, for example, in the city, or how much you have to spend on housing. So I think what we'll do is just go down the table in this order, Daniel, and you were particularly talkative and had an interesting kind of perspective on all this in the other room just before we chat. I told you not to use up all your good lines before we got here, but maybe you could just talk a little bit about you and where you work, and then how your experience has been with housing.
Sure. So
I think it's maybe working, hopefully.
Is this on?
Yep.
So I've lived in Toronto for about 10 years now, and the entire time that I've lived here, I've rented. And when I first moved here, lived with roommates, lived in an apartment building. It was a great experience. I've since then settled down. I have a 5-year-old daughter who is now in school, and we live in the Junction, which is a great little community. Really enjoy the access to parks, transportation, and all of our neighbors. And I'm kind of in this strange position where we're currently still rent and would like to move, but when thinking about what we can afford and what the conversation really shifts to what that experience becomes. Probably afford a condo right now, but the lifestyle of what you would be experiencing living in a condo is very different. I mean, what sort of parks will my daughter have the access to going to? What do schools look like in that area? Is the condo, or does a regular condo in Toronto have people living in it that are accepting of kids and what that experience looks like? You know, so it's a lot of those things are things that I struggle with, whether I should just continue renting or whether we should explore other options. And in my particular case, I really do not want to leave the city. I really do feel like when I made the decision to move to Canada, I specifically wanted to come to Toronto for everything that it does offer. And the idea of leaving those opportunities and leaving this experience in order to just sort of live in a much more quiet area is not something that I'm looking at.
Okay, well, I think we're going to hear that theme continue to come up. Nick, when it's ancient history now, but when my wife and I, the trigger point for us to actually look for other housing was when we had our second child living in a small 2-bedroom apartment, and it just was not anymore kind of, it wasn't something you'd rather have other arrangements with slightly more space, and I think that's where you find yourself today. But talk about your own situation in terms of.
Sure. So Nick Petraglia. I've been living in Toronto my whole life. I grew up here. When my parents came to Canada. I went abroad, and when I came back after living abroad, I wanted to live in Toronto, and I wanted to live in proper Toronto. At the time, we were a family of 3. Now we're a family of 4, living in a 2-bedroom. Duplex, space is getting tight, but looking at 3 bedrooms in our area at Ossington and Christie and Dupont area it's just unaffordable. It's a matter of taking out $1,000 or a little bit less out of our budget to get that 3rd bedroom. And we were lucky enough that when we first came to Canada, or came back to Canada in 2012, we were to find a market rent unit with Toronto Community Housing. And we still live there. We live there because you just can't justify dishing out that extra amount of money to go into the regular market for a 3-bedroom. And people say, well, you've got, you have a good job, and I do have a good job, and the salary's good, but at the same time, that $1,000 could mean no soccer for my kids, no swimming lessons. It could not, even a trip, a camping trip in the summer. And people don't see that, the recreational component of your lifestyle, as being part of housing. It's not just a matter of paying your meals and your housing, but it's also a matter of having that capability. And in terms of buying a home or not, as I mentioned earlier, like in your conversation before this, if I have to rent for the rest of my life, I'm okay with it. But are the units going to be available? Like, I can move into a house, and then 3 years later, the landlord could just say, "Listen, I'm selling the house," or I'm moving into the unit, and I no longer now have to go find some more. So maybe sometime that conversation needs to go in that direction, where we're also looking at that availability of rental units, long-term rental units, and not just simply, can I buy a house or can I not buy a house?
Vince, again, family that you're happy to have, but it confronts you with a housing challenge that you might just tell us about.
Right. So right now, married, 2 boys. We live in a 2-bedroom townhouse. Wonderful new development north of Davenport, in the Lansdowne area. We really enjoy our neighborhood, enjoy the schools, enjoy all the amenities that the city has. We both grew up in the suburbs, but have made Toronto home for the past 15 years or so. Now we need that, in a few years, we want that next stage. We need a 3-bedroom home. We don't need the amenities of the backyard. The townhouse is fine with us. Maybe even a condo, but it's affordable. Yeah, we want our next home, 3 bedrooms, in a good school district. And we just worry about the cost of that. I work in real estate as a marketer, so I see the prices every day. I see how they are going up every single day, and it's hard. It's hard to wrap my head around the affordability of housing tomorrow or in 3 years.
Ayanna, tell us a bit about your own circumstances when it comes to housing that you have and housing you'd like to have.
Sure. My experience is a little bit different than these gentlemen here. I'm a single person, just newly out of university, so I currently have 2 roommates. I love the area that I live in, which is Ossington area, but I've seen the prices of houses that it costs to live there, and that just seems so far from what I could even imagine affording. It almost feels more like a fantasy than reality that could ever be in my grasp. And I finally have that secure job. I love my job here at WattPad. But like imagining moving my life forward, it's very difficult because not only to own a home but also to rent a home just seems so out of reach for myself. And I consider myself somebody that is independent and wants to continue to be independent, but the housing market and the rental opportunities are not for a single person so far that I've seen. So thinking about moving my life forward is very difficult to kind of grasp without having a partner with me. And as I move my life forward, I want to live that life without having multiple roommates like I'm still a student, or having to depend on somebody else. I really want to just have a full independent life, and hopefully somebody that I choose to, not out of necessity, but out of pure choice. And I feel like that's not an option that I foresee in the near future.
Thank you. Amanda, I think I'm right that you've actually been looking, because you were talking in the other room about how you've seen prices in various brackets and how you think they don't actually represent what the houses will sell for or what they actually do help. Maybe you could talk a little bit about it, because you'd like to own a home and what that search has been like.
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely like to own a home. I'm actually not from Toronto originally. I'm from Ottawa, but I have been living here for the past 5 years. And just to try and echo what Ayana just said, I'm only able to start thinking about looking for a house because I have the second income of my partner. We've been looking since, I'd say, probably April of this year. And what we've seen is, the competition is extremely high. There is a supply and demand issue here in the city, especially for something very specific. And what we're looking for is, 2-bedroom, maybe 3-bedroom. But what's important to us is that we have the ability to sort of subsidize the mortgage with a rental income. So we're looking at places with maybe a rentable basement, something like that. And what we've noticed is that that's something a lot of people, in our demographic is looking for, which has been extremely challenging. We've seen places, that we've liked, and we thought, maybe we can try putting an offer on this place. But the competition is so high that we've been left with, at times, 60 minutes, like an hour, to submit an offer because there's been a bully offer. So the pressure of making such a big and important decision has been difficult for us. But yeah, and the competition, I guess, is sort of the main issue that we're facing right now. We go and we see places the day houses are listed, and we see so many other families and couples there at the same time, even before the open house on the weekend. So it's very, very discouraging. So yeah, I guess that's sort of been my overall experience, and just hoping to see some change in the market at some point.
Can I get those of you who want to comment on a couple of things that kind of came up, and a couple of you kind of raised it, along the way. The first might be, we did have a little chat in the other room, and a couple of you said, well, in days gone by, it might have been the case that you just moved to Pickering or Oakville, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, they're part of our region here that we're proud of. But you just said that it wasn't something that was on your radar screen, and you had a very strong desire to stay in the city. And maybe a couple of you that feel that way might just comment on that, because I think it for you anyway, it eliminates for the moment that notion of just saying, well, let's just go to Ajax or let's go to Mississauga, because you just don't have that as an option. Anybody want to comment on that?
I live, sleep, breathe Toronto. It's just the city that I love, and for me, moving away is really not an option, and not just because I'm proud to be from Toronto, but more importantly because of the amenities. I bike to work. If I didn't bike to work, I can TTC to work. And also in case of an emergency, if my kid, there's something wrong at school, for me it's an hour walk, a less than $20 cab ride. Whereas I have colleagues who live in Pickering, who live in Oakville and all in between, and for them it's a $200 cab ride just to get, and because they have to obviously wait for the train or whatever it is. And from a commuting perspective, I don't want to spend 20 hours a week in my car just so I can have a bigger backyard. I like the fact that I can walk to the supermarket, that I can walk to the local cafe. I can walk to my kids' school when I drop them off and such. And not to say that we don't